Well, thank you. Good afternoon. If you're eating, please continue eating. Even if Tebow were speaking and I had food, I'd keep eating. So enjoy your meal, and it's good to be with you. I do want to get a little housekeeping out before we get too far into this. I met one guy here, that's my man Mike, who's a Gator. Are there any other Gators in the room? 2, 3, 4. All right, the numbers aren't in our favor. So mark the exits if needed, and we can make a quick getaway. Who are the most cheered for teams here? Yell out your team. Who do we like? Aggies. The Aggies. Is that the number one probably in the room, Aggie fans? Okay. Texas? Wow. Okay. Wow. We could actually take out the Texas. The Gators could roll up against the Texas, but we're not going against the Aggies. Anyway, it's great to be here. It's fun to cheer for our teams and think about the times in the past. You know, I obviously played for Florida and got to play for a coach named Steve Spurrier and just had a wonderful experience there. A lot of wins and success. You know, my first play, though, was a kind of iconic moment playing for him. We were running a corner route. I came in as a backup. I was a young guy. And I go to throw the corner, and right as I threw it, the receiver broke his route flatter than I thought it was going to go. So I threw it where I thought, but it was overthrown. It was intercepted. So this is one of those moments where, you know, usually someone gets yelled at. Usually somebody gets benched. And you didn't want to kind of be the guy pointing the finger, but you kind of did. It's like, this guy was his fault. So I get to the sideline, and I was so thankful at first because Coach Spurrier said, "Don't worry, Danny, it's not your fault." So he said, "It's my fault for even letting you in the game. You're out." So that was my introduction to Steve Spurrier and SEC football, but fortunately it didn't end there. We went on and won 4 SECs, and we lost the national title my junior year to Nebraska, and then we won my senior year against Florida State. So just really grateful for my time at Florida, the success that we had and all that's entailed from that. Great memories. I was then drafted by the New Orleans Saints. So trivia, anybody remember who the coach was? Ditka, yeah. Most people don't remember that. They remember him because Chicago, when he won. No one remembers much about us in New Orleans. We were not very successful. But in fact, after 3 years, they fired all the coaches, all the players, and then we had a dog, called it Fetch Monster, who after the kickoff, the dog's job was to run on the field and get the tee and bring it back. The dog was 16 for 16. Never missed once. Dog got fired too. So it was a rough patch for New Orleans. My first start as a rookie, a real interesting play happened towards the end of the game. We were losing 7-0. Imagine not scoring a point the whole game. That was so hard after being at Florida. And so I was in there. We were trying desperately to tie the game. I was back to pass, and I had a first read over this side, second read in the middle, third read on the left. What I didn't notice, though, was the defensive end on my left, he beat the tackle off the ball and was coming in just fast, hot. Now there's a word for that. They say, unabated. Sometimes they stop the play. If they let the play go on, he can't hit you below the knee. He can't hit you above the shoulders. If he hits you anywhere else, he has to, touch you. It's like, they really protect the quarterbacks now. But back then, everybody's like, oh, this one's going to be a good one. Get out the cameras, zoom in. So it just so happened that as I scanned my head back, was when this guy dove head first, and the crown of his helmet hit me right in the temple. So we went over, he spun around. Somehow he fell off, and I stood up for a second, but I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. I remember blinking my eyes thinking this is not good, and before I knew it, I ended up on the ground, took a deep breath, and was just grateful the play was over because you never want to experience something like that. I began to gather my breath, took a deep breath, started to get up, but was still disoriented because it was still pitch black. I couldn't see anything. What had happened was when he hit me, and as he fell this way and I spun this way, somehow our helmets connected in a way that my helmet spun all the way around my head and was just on backwards. So it wasn't that I was blind. For a moment, I thought maybe I had died. which then I wondered, why wasn't I seeing or hearing Jesus? But no, it wasn't that. It's funny now, thanks for laughing, but at the time I was nervous. One of the linemen said, well, if you thought you had died, did you see a light? A lot of people, when they have these near-death experiences, see lights. So I thought, you know what? I did see a light, but it wasn't so much coming at me. It was like this circle that was moving. And he's like, oh, yeah, that was just your ear hole as it was passing your eyes to have the helmet on backwards. So that was, unfortunately, my welcome to the NFL moment. And for many, including the late wonderful coach and commentator John Madden, that was one of his favorite plays. For the rest of my career, I could have been the backup or the third-string quarterback, minding my own business, but in that lull in the middle of the third quarter when they needed something to talk about, John Madden would show me on the sideline with my clipboard and then show this play of me getting my helmet backwards. So that was my highlight NFL play. Well, one of the reasons I want to tell that story is because I think it sets a tone for a few of the things that I want to share during our time. I'll share a few of those, tell a story, and then if there's time, we might do some Q&A at the end. So if throughout any of this, if you have any thoughts or questions, keep that in mind, and we can just continue talking when I'm finished. But think about the moment in this play. After this guy hits me, he falls off, I stood up, and think for a moment about all the things that were still happening that potentially could have made that play successful. Still. So imagine the receiver's coming out of his route thinking he might be getting the ball. He's doing his job. You know, all the other linemen are blocking except for the first guy who's, I don't know what he was doing at this point. You know, the quarterback was still standing in the pocket holding the ball looking down the field, right? So all these things were still in play for a play to be successful. There just happened to be one thing that was vitally important that wasn't working that just ended the entire play. And that was me, the quarterback, couldn't see. I couldn't see the things I needed to see to execute the play. And I think there's this metaphor of what we see, what we notice, what we pay attention to that is critical and it can really make all the other things important or not important depending on what or if or how we see. There's a unique scene in a movie from the 90s. If anybody remembers the movie Patch Adams, it was a movie with Robin Williams. He was a doctor. He made people laugh. That was part of the process to help them be well. And there was this scene in the movie where he went into a mental institution, and as he was standing there, this old gray-haired man runs right up to him, and he puts 4 fingers right in his face, and he said, "How many fingers do you see? How many?" So, of course, Patch, Robin Williams, says, 4. And he goes, 4? You're crazy. You're all crazy. Runs off. So Patch sees him do this a few more times and eventually asks a custodian who works there, is like, what's wrong with this guy? This guy's really not seeing well, is he? And the guy says, maybe not. But that's Dr. Arthur Mendelsohn. He's one of the smartest scientific minds of our time. So something happened in the mind of Patch. I'm going to guess what it might be. But to me, this might be one of the most important things I say today. This has become one of the most important themes in my life. I think Patch asked the question. He's something like this. I wonder if there's more to see than I'm seeing. I wonder if I'm missing something here. Maybe I'm looking at this incorrectly. Even though all the evidence in the world points to a clear answer here, maybe I'm missing something. And that prompts him to go have a discussion with Dr. Arthur Mendelsohn. And I want to stop there just for a minute because I have noticed in my own heart and in my own life that the older I get, the more I know, the more I study and the more experiences I have and the more success that I have, the less I ask that question. I think one of the curses of being successful, and I think there's a lot of successful people in this room, is as we get more successful, we ask that question less. But guess what? How and where and how is God going to break into our life with something new if we think we've got it all figured out? I think one of the most important characteristic traits in a human as we get older is to have a curious mindset, an open mindset. What am I missing? As opposed to getting so certain Well, for Patch, he goes and talks to the doctor. The doctor finally says, don't look at the fingers, Patch. Look past the fingers and focus on my face or something beyond. And the screen in the movie did that. And when you focus on something farther, you get near what we would call double vision. And you could see that there was 8 fingers then showed up in the camera, and it works. And then Dr. Mendelsohn said, Patch, everybody focuses on the wrong thing. No one knows what to really look at, but if you really want to know what's important, you've got to learn to focus on what's most important. And even as a young man, when I saw that scene, it reminded me of what's now become one of my life verses, where Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4:18, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. That we are going to do our very best to ask in every situation, when I'm dealing with this person, when I'm dealing with my family, when I'm dealing with work, and the good times and the bad times, when we're dealing with these issues that now all seem to be political and culture wars and this side or that side, this idea that maybe there's more to see. And that maybe if we look at something with an eternal perspective, we'll begin to engage in a much deeper, better, and eternal way. And so what I want to do for just a few minutes, I want to share 5 of these things that I keep bumping into that I think God is forcing me to look at in a little bit deeper way. I think you all know all this. None of it should be new. It's just kind of things we all know that are reminded of with a slightly perhaps more eternal perspective if we can. And then I'll finish with a quick story, and then we'll do some questions. These particular 5 things, I was first sort of saw them in this form through a book that was written by a Catholic priest named Richard Rohr. The name of the book was Adam's Return. And he listed these 5 things as things that the book was actually a fascinating book about how different cultures and different religions throughout all time used to do initiation passages, these rites of passage for their boys to become men. Very strict, serious, sometimes very barbaric, but like before you were a boy and after you were a man, and you knew it. And one of his thesis in the book is that we don't do any of that anymore, so we have a bunch of guys our age that are really kind of overgrown kids, which I feel like sometimes myself, I don't know. So anyway, but I saw these things in that format, and I realized these are things I want to wrestle with and see from a deeper perspective. The first one is something my dad used to tell me a lot, and I hated it. I hated it when he said it then. I hate it now. Usually when something wasn't going well, I might be complaining about something wouldn't go my way, and I'm starting to vent a little bit. He was a good dad. He would listen for so long. And then he dropped this clobber one on you, which you hated. It was, well, son, Danny, life is tough. Like, yeah, thanks, Dad. That's not really helpful right now. I don't like it. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. Because I think if I'm honest and we're honest, we all want to get to the point where it's not. Where we finally get to where it's smooth sailing, where things go well, where things go our way, where we don't have to have all that extra conflict or challenge or struggle. And if you don't believe it, that's why our entire marketing world in the U.S. is based on the next product, the next thing you can do, the next thing to sort of finally get you there to where life isn't tough. But the reality is it is. Certainly we bring a lot out on ourselves. If you're like me, you've done enough things in your life that created your own suffering, and that's part of our lives. But you know what? Even beyond that, just part of being human, there's suffering that comes along with it. As we get older, it gets more around us, and it's tough. And I think when we sort of think in the short term, like we don't want it to be tough, then not only when it happens is it tough, it's also disorienting. We're not ready for it. We're not prepared for it. And so to me, the first thing to think about as we're navigating life is life is tough. And let's not forget that, and let's embrace that. Second thing, I've got 3 kids, 2 boys and a daughter. They're 19, 17, and 14 now. But when the boys were younger, their favorite thing to play with was Legos. So they had collected lots of Legos. I mean, thousands and thousands of Legos over the years. But we noticed a pattern. Every time they would play, they would begin to share, because there was thousands of Legos and 2 boys. But eventually, you know what would happen, right? Eventually, it'd be something like, oh, well, that one's mine. No, that one's mine. It's mine. Mine. It was like funny when they were 4 and 2. What about when they're like 12 and 10, or literally when they were 18 and 16, and one of them may have punched the other one at the dinner table? Or what about when they're 20 or 40 or 60 or 80, and we may not run around screaming, mine, over a Lego, but if we're honest and we really look at our lives, especially the way that we spend our time, the way that we use our talents, the way that we spend our money, it's usually very much centered around me, around mine, or at the very best, my family. And thinking about, is my time really just my time, how I schedule my time? Is my talent, this is a gift that God gave all of us different talents, and we all have it. Hopefully we find it and craft it and develop it, but is it really just for me? Is it mine? My brain works fast. Not like really smart, but in all the testing that I've done throughout my life, I have a really fast processor. That worked really well playing quarterback. That was a great thing to have, but can I claim that? No, it was a gift. It was a talent that God gifted me. We all have those. And then the resources that we have, the money that God's entrusted to us. Is it mine, or are we stewarding it? And I think that's really point number 2 is, it's not about you. Life is not about you. We desperately want to be like this main character, but that's a really bad story if we're the main character. But we get to be a supporting actor in the greatest story ever told when we realize that it's really not just about us. And I know many of you in this room and different things that people are involved in, and this ministry itself is just an incredible opportunity to grow and learn and challenge that. Like, how can we make our lives not about us? Because that's what we were created for. Part of my story was New Orleans, and I got involved with Desire Street Ministries. I started volunteering in '97, became the director after I retired in '05, and we operate out of Atlanta now, and we partner with under-resourced leaders all over the country, where we help them develop for 5 years their leadership, their ability to effectively do the ministry in their neighborhoods, along with building their boards, help them learn how to raise money, and it's just been an incredibly rewarding but challenging thing. And then just in the last few years, also launched the Wuerffel Foundation, which also helps other nonprofits, not just under-resourced ones, do the same thing, as well as we have a college football award that was named after me for community service, which is really cool. So it's not how many yards you have or how many tackles or how many touchdowns, but how many hours of community service did you do? How creative were you in helping other people? And so we steward that. So I'm really excited to be a part of those things. And if you would love to learn any more about any of that, you could the hardest part is spelling my last name. If you can get through DannyWuerffel.com, you can get links to Desire Street as well as the Wuerffel Foundation. 1, life is tough. 2, it's not about you. 3, so I was in New York several years ago for the Heisman Trophy. It's a pretty unique place to be when you have 40 Heisman Trophy winners in one hotel. Draws a lot of people, including autograph seekers and sellers. So there's this game kind of between the autograph sellers and the Heisman winners, where they're trying to get you to sign stuff. You're trying to figure out if they're legit or not. Well, so they get smart. So now they give it to kids to ask you, and then you're like, does this kid really want my autograph, or is this kid just trying to sell it? Well, I had this experience one year where this kid followed me into the bathroom in the lobby of the hotel. Thankfully, at least waited by the door. That was semi-polite, right? So I'm walking out, and one of the ways you can catch them is you ask if they want you to put their name on it. Like, to Johnny, go Gators, Danny Wuerffel is harder to sell than just Danny Wuerffel. So I said to this kid, young man, who would you like me to make this out to? And he froze. And I thought, you are not going to use my name, image, and likeness, my NIL, which that's another story I'm a little bitter about now, but you're not using my NIL And so I said to him, I said, if you don't give me a name, I'm not signing this helmet for you. He said, I'm really sorry. I have no idea who you are. But I saw you were in that room where Tim Tebow is, and so I was just going to ask if you would take my helmet in that room and have Tebow sign it. I said, no. Maybe one day I'll be like humble enough to do something like that. But no, point number 3 is you're not that important. You know, we do so many things. We all have our unique ways in our games that we play to try to prove to the world or prove to someone or prove to our dad or prove to our colleagues or prove to our, that we're really unique and important and amazing. And we do all these things. We dress certain ways. We get certain degrees. We have certain jobs. We drive certain cars. Like there's all these games that we play that if we're honest, so often we're just trying to prove to the world or to someone that we're that important. And the reality is you're not that important. I'll never forget, I was in the Atlanta airport, and I got on one of those things to have my shoes shine. And you got to picture this guy. He was down on his knee or on his stool, and I was curious. I was curious if he was a football fan, and curious if he'd care if he was working with a Heisman Trophy winner. So a little bit of probably caring about what this guy thinks. Probably a little bit of ego needs a little hit, but you don't always say that. So I broached it very carefully because I was not gonna totally look too cocky, but I said, "Oh, have you ever met a celebrity?" You got to picture this, man. This guy's down here. He stops. It was an awkward pause. So I almost asked again. Thank goodness I didn't. He looks up at me and he said, "Sir, in my world, there are no celebrities. And if anybody's up on a pedestal, it's because they put themselves there. And it doesn't mean anything to me." And then he starts shining my shoes again. Bam! You talk about getting struck. Like if there was a Hall of Famer in that interaction, it was him because he saw the truth. We're playing a lot of games. So life is tough. It's not about you. You're not that important. Disclaimer, this is really bad news, by the way. All 5 of these stink, and it just gets worse from here. So be encouraged. Life's going to be worse than you think. It's not about you. You're not that important. Number 4, you're not in control. Man, this is a tough one, especially for go-getters, especially for a lot of men. We want to control things, and certainly when I say, when you think about a control freak, someone probably comes to your mind, someone that's a little bit overdoes it. But I'm of the mind now that we are all control freaks. We just have different strategies. I'm a control freak. I just try to do it through niceness. I try to get you to like me. I try to be super nice, and then I get you to do what I want. That's like my go-to unredeemed strategy in life. But other people are more powerful. Other people are more conniving. We're all playing this game because to think about the world being uncontrollable is very scary. I love the serenity prayer. Many people have found a lot of comfort from that. God, give me the serenity to accept what I can't control, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Many of us know that prayer. Well, as guys, I love the one where I need courage. Tell me I can't run through that window. I'll run through that window. Tell me I can't do something. I can do it. I'll have the strength. I'll have the fortitude. But sometimes life gives you challenges that you can't just push through. I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome 12 years ago, which is an autoimmune disorder. I was paralyzed for a couple of weeks, could barely move for a couple of months, and was tired for over a year. And I couldn't just push through that. There are challenges that inevitably come that you can't control, and just this ability to recognize that and trust that. Man, I want to figure out how to control it. I don't want to look through that and realize that I have to learn to trust. The last one is this idea that everything comes to an end, and ultimately each of us will die. Talk about a real morbid speech. He's probably not going to invite me back because this is not real fun and exciting stuff to think about. But I think if you, again, look at this stuff from just a temporary perspective, it can be like, man, this is hard. When you look at each of these from an eternal perspective, when you think, what might God be doing? Think about this in your own life and the people around you. The most amazing people you know have people that have been through tough times. The tough times shape them. The tough times shape you. We are who we are, not when we're accepting trophies, but when we're paralyzed, when we're going through hurricanes. It's the tough times in life that give us the opportunity to grow if you think about it from an eternal perspective. You know, you're not the main character, but you get to be a small character in the greatest story ever told. You know, you're not that important, but it's really not that you're not that important. It's that everybody's important. Everybody's created in the image of God, regardless of what you look like, where you're from, what zip code you came from, regardless of what good decisions you've made or bad decisions you've made. Everybody is significantly important because God said so. I'm not in control. You're not in control. But it's okay because we can trust someone who is. Even when it doesn't feel like he is, he still is. And lastly, and maybe the most difficult and the most beautiful, you cannot have a new birth. You cannot have resurrection without a death or a dying. Almost the greatest things that happened in my life were because something had to die first and then resurrection comes second. We are who we are as Christians because after a death, there's a resurrection. And can we trust even in that when things end, something new can be done? This is what God can do in our lives when we begin to look not just at what's in front of us, but at things eternal. I'm going to tell one more story, and then again, if you have any questions or comments or jokes, we can have a few minutes for that. So several years back, shortly after my college career, I was in the NFL for a couple years, and anytime you have success in a public way, you get an opportunity to tell your story, and people ask you questions, and often you get a chance to write a book. So I had a publisher company come to me saying, we'd love to help you write your book and tell your story about what helped you be successful. So I said, okay. So I came up with 8 ideas for chapters. They looked at it and they're like, these are really great ideas, good ideas, but these are like everybody's ideas. You need to come up with something distinct, something about you and your life that might be slightly different, that could kind of separate you from all the other people out there doing the same thing. So they said, you need to really think about your life, introspect, see what you find. So I began this exercise of really looking at my life, the whole span of it, to try to find anything that was unique. And I noticed several memories from my childhood on that were really strong in my memory, but it wasn't just the memory of the event. What was interesting, what made me curious, was I could also remember what I was saying to myself in my head. I can remember the voice in my head. So for instance, first grade, all that mattered was winning the 100-yard dash at field day and getting the blue ribbon. Remember when they used to do that? Yeah, there was one blue ribbon. It wasn't like everybody got a ribbon. It wasn't like everybody got a trophy. You had to win to get the ribbon, and the competitive part of me loved that. But what I remember is this voice for weeks before field day saying, you are so fast. Danny, you're the fastest kid. You really are fast, you are fast. For some reason, I remember telling myself that. A few years later, I was taking a test. It was a true or false test, so you had a 50-50 chance to guess it right, but I didn't know the answer to one of the problems, so I decided to do some creative research. The girl sitting next to me was super smart. I was curious what she was thinking about this particular question. So I began to scan over, and this voice, this is what I remember again, this voice in my head saying, Danny, you're a good kid. You don't need to cheat. You're smart. You're a good kid. You don't need to cheat. You're smart. I just remember that voice, so I didn't, at least at that point. Probably several years later, I might have been looking towards her again, but for a different reason, but we're not going to talk about that either. I'll never forget, though, my senior year of high school. This is the strongest memory of this. We had just won the state championship in football. I was the quarterback, and now it was basketball season. So I'm playing basketball. Average basketball player, not great. I could shoot and hustle. That was about it. But we were playing a team in the regional playoffs. Again, this team was average as well, except for one factor. They had a center who was 6'6", 290, and got almost every rebound. So an average team that gets every rebound becomes a really good team. So we're playing this team, and our coach comes up with this brilliant strategy. He said, we're going to use a very creative defense. It's called a box and one. 4 men play zone, and one person plays man-to-man against this guy. We called him Goliath, rightly so. This guy could have took down Goliath, I'm sure. And so we're like, great. He said, Danny, yes, sir, you're the guy. No, sir. No, somebody else, surely. He's like, no, you're the guy. You can do this. But here's what I remember, the voice. Danny, you are so strong. You are the strongest kid. So for this whole week going up to this game, this voice, you are strong. I remember walking down the hallway, bathroom door. Should I push it open or should I kick it open? Because I'm so strong. I remember that actual thought, that vision of that, but the voice. So that's when I figured this might be something. Well, to finish that particular story, this dude must have known that I was a quarterback because right before the game, he walks up right in front of us with all of our fans behind us and our team, and he like goes way out of his way, and it's like a wrestling promotion moment. He goes, the quarterback is going down. Like literally, like a WWF or something. So, game started. He's bigger, he's stronger, but there's something called leverage. If you get lower, you can move big things. So I got super low, got underneath the center of gravity. I boxed him out to the free throw line and then to the three-point line. Next time down, had to get lower, but did it again. Got way underneath him, took him all the way back. He started cursing. They called a technical foul. I shot both of them. I made them both. In my mind, I was looking at them both times. It was like, took him to the ground a handful of times. He ended up opting out of the game at the end of the middle of the fourth quarter, kind of like he was banged up. And it was like the first time I got to bang up anybody because I was always the one getting hit. So I thought I had found it, right? This is my book. This is my contribution to the world is I had learned how to talk to myself, and I was going to teach other people how to do it. It was brilliant. I think there's something there. I do. But I think there's something more there. Because right as this was happening, we had our son Jonah. My mom, grandparents who come to help with their grandbabies, praise God, she came to our house, and one morning early, my book changed. I was walking by the nursery, and something must have happened where Jonah was fussing, so my mom's in the nursery at my house holding my 3-day-old son. And as I walked by, I heard some things from my mom, like, Jonah, you are such a good boy. Jonah, you are so smart. Jonah, you are so strong. And I walked by thinking, man, I feel like I've heard that before. I went by later, and she's holding him up going, oh, Jonah, you have the strongest eyelids of any 3-day-old. I've never seen a baby as strong. And he's just like this, and his eyelids like this. And she's just like speaking into him. And I started to laugh because I was getting it. I came back maybe 15 minutes later, so now it's like 20 or 30 minutes of my mom holding my son in my house. You are such a good boy, and I love you so much, and you are so strong, and you are so good, and you are mine. And I just start crying because it wasn't my voice. It was the voice of my mom. She should write the book, right? It was the voice of my dad. It was the voice of my high school youth group leaders. It was the voice of the pastors and the ministry leaders. But really, it was the voice of God, I think, speaking through them into me before I'd thrown a touchdown or an interception, before I'd done something good or bad, before I didn't cheat or before I did cheat, before and apart from any of that, this gospel message that I was loved just because I was part of the family. I was created in God's image, and he was moving towards me with love, and whether I deserved it or not, that this message was being spoken through her to me. Shared that story a lot, and one time a guy came up, and he was crying, but it wasn't good tears. I'm like, what's wrong? It's a great story. He said, well, Danny, I heard voices too, but they weren't so kind. And as I've gotten older and I've done more work and looked back on my life and put some work in, I've realized that there's a lot of different voices I heard too that we wrestle with that are on the inside. And ultimately, to me, it comes down to this. God speaks love in and to us. God blesses us. God fills us, not just for us, but so that we can be a blessing to those around us. And that to me is the circle of life. No offense to the Lion King. It's this idea that God is blessing us, that we can in turn be a blessing to other people. Thank you for being here. Thank you for Toolbox and the ministry that's being a blessing to others. I do think we've got a few minutes for some questions, if anybody has any, but if not, I won't be offended either. Yeah, we have Terry.
For young athletes that are just being beaten down by coaches, what advice do you give them? My son has come home from football practice the last 2 nights in tears because he's been beaten down. So I would love to know what you would tell somebody like that, young athlete, something like that.
Yeah, man, I hate it. I think there's so many coaches that have really, haven't done their work. And they coach out of all their brokenness as well, and it's a really unhelpful situation. So I feel bad for that. I think, one, it goes back to partly what my dad told me, and it's the worst news you can say, is recognizing that, this life is hard. Like, this is going to be hard, and I'm sorry you're going through this, that it is tough. That's just a tough thing. But I think, hopefully, we're all, as parents, helping to give our kids so much centering and affirmation in who they are that when those other things come, they can withstand them and push through those things. And hopefully he's got some good friends around him to support him as well, because my kids don't want to hear anything I have to say anymore. But if their friend or their girlfriend tells them something, it's like from God. So hopefully you've got a good network around him, and it'll be part of his story.
How do you not get burnt out when you're serving for Christ?
Great question. How do you not get burnt out? So we talk a lot about, you've heard the illustration on the airplanes where when the oxygen comes out, if you're traveling with small children, you get it to the children first, right? No, they say, get your mask on first, because if you pass out, you're not helping anybody. And, I feel like Desire Street, one of our main goals in ministry is helping leaders learn how to take care of themselves well for the long haul. We teach and preach a lot of things about pace and rhythms. But like a lot of things, sometimes they're easier to teach than do yourself. I think part of the reason God graced me with being sick years ago, there's a book that was called A Severe Mercy. Interesting title for a book. I felt like that was what Guillain-Barré was for me, because I was going fast in lots of directions, all good stuff, but just you can't do that forever, And I think God just completely shut me down physically to begin thinking about that. For me, I have learned to spend a lot of time alone, a lot of time in silence, kind of meditation and silent prayer. I try to spend 30 or 45 minutes a day on the porch with no distractions, quiet, still. And then after that, we'll look at a Bible verse and start hearing from God, as opposed to if I go right into the Bible verse, I'm usually just recycling my own thoughts as opposed to being able to listen. We do regular retreats that we have and try to take some time for that. And then also, I really think a lot of us, especially men, have not done a lot of work around kind of recognizing, owning, and managing our own emotions. And I think those things get stored up and get bottled up in weird ways, and we don't even know it. And so I've done a lot of journaling over the years where I'm really trying to recognize what I'm feeling. I've always been a genius at knowing what everyone else is feeling. Like, I can probably look in this audience right now, and just from recognizing several of your faces, I could pick up what's going on. I mean, my guy here is a real happy guy. He's been smiling the whole time, which is real affirming, and I thank you as a speaker. But, I was never in touch with mine. I was in touch with what I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to respond, what was going to make this work. That's all that mattered to me. And to be able to begin more to be in touch with how I'm feeling and not let that either get pushed aside or take over, but to have that be like good information has been really helpful for me to be healthy.
Any regrets of something you should have done or something you didn't do?
Oh, man.
Any regrets was the question.
Regrets of not doing something or something you shouldn't have done?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those, as a parent, yeah, a lot of those as a parent. Parents been very humbling for me. You know, most things in my life I was either pretty good at, or I at least told myself if I tried, I'd be really good at it. Another exception to that was golf. I put some effort in there before and didn't get very good. That was frustrating, but the family piece has been very, very humbling. I thought I caught my kid lying when he was little, and I really wanted to make an example. And so to give him a chance to come clean, I actually faked a phone call to another parent to give him a chance to come clean, and he didn't. So then I went and spanked him. And then I called the parent and found out he had told the truth. And I just modeled lying to catch him lying. I wish I could have that one back. Although he loves that one. Hey, Dad, remember when you spanked me and you lied and I didn't? Can I spank you now? Lots of mistakes in ministry, lots of mistakes in leadership. Some of that just not being well educated, and some of it, if all's the same, I prefer not to have conflict than to jump into it. And sometimes by trying to avoid conflict, it's led to more. Those are a few regrets. Many more, but I'll share my bigger ones if you do. I'm just kidding.
Last question back there.
It seemed like on TV that Steve Spurrier was really hard on quarterbacks. Was he always like that? And what lessons did you learn from him?
Man, yes, he was very hard on quarterbacks. The thing is, winning covers a multitude of sins in a lot of ways. And when we had so much success in one, it created just incredible memories. And he's like I don't know who's filming this or where it's going, but hopefully it doesn't get back to him. But how there's some people that struggled as a parent, but then when they're their grandparent, they're like the best. And then the parents kind of like, your kids love them, but you're like, well, they weren't as nice to me as they are to you type of thing. Well, he's like the great grand coach. He's retired now, and he's the greatest, and he's happy, and he always is wonderful now. But he pushed you hard. He was very, very tough as a coach in the things that he did. Learned tons of stuff from him as a competitor, as a thinker, as a strategist. One of the things that I'll never forget about him was he was super detailed, almost anally detailed on certain things, and yet somehow he was still creative and flexible. And most people are one or the other, and he somehow married those together. So I'm always trying to bring that into decisions in life, is how can I make sure there's structure, but I can also have some flexibility. So you guys, this has been fantastic being with you. To my 3 Gators, thank you. God bless. Go Gators. Keep up the good work. Toolbox Ministry. God bless you.